pretty good here, but
There was definitely moments where it was heavy. The
yeah,
content
anyway.
went to a third party. Okay. Sorry, it's been a few weeks since I've used Zoom. So
I don't know.
unsupported get request does not exist. Cannot be loaded due to missing permissions. That's not what I was anticipating. Meeting is now streaming live. Well, okay, so I'm getting an error message on one, and I'm getting another message over here that's saying meeting is now streaming live on Facebook, which is the whole intent. And we're going to record. Ah, there we go. Now we are live and got Bob Tassone on the phone. Good morning, Bob Tassone.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing well. So listen, interesting stuff going on in real estate this year. It is 2024. January, first couple of weeks here, 2024, coming out of the holidays. Hey, happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
I noticed that you're celebrating that
Just
here.
another day.
You're just another day, right? I try to skip every other one now.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're
At that
born on
point,
March 29th, or February 29th, I should say, then,
you got at
then
least
you only have a birthday every 4 years.
Oh man, wouldn't that be like you'd only be like, you know,
Yeah.
15 right now, right? So these are interesting times. I've been having some conversations with folks, and of course, I like to talk about real estate. I love that you can get on here and talk with me about insurance and what it means for your home and how do you protect your assets. So this is part of why I love these conversations is you have been doing insurance and you're an expert in the industry and the marketplace here in the greater Williamsburg area. We have all kinds of things that happen. Life happens,
Yeah.
and you can't prevent
Forrest Gump says that something else happens.
it. It happens. So really
Words that we
interesting.
don't use online or on.
Right. So, one of the things that we were going to talk about today is, how the insurance company rates your homeowner's insurance. Well, obviously there's a lot of factors that are involved in that. Well, I happen
Yeah.
to have a real life scenario that is happening right now as we speak. I have a home purchaser that has a contract on a house right here in our area, and we just got ratified on Monday with my buyer wanting to buy that house. Now, the home seller is working with a relocation company. So there is a reload company that's involved in this transaction. The reload company basically steps into the shoes of the seller, acquires the opportunity to be able to sell it, and there's contractual things and legal stuff that happens as a result of that. We're not gonna worry about that too much, but the seller has homeowners insurance. We had a really bad storm last night that was kicking up some wind and had a lot of rain. Well, guess what? We got a tree in the living room.
Good
We
thing
were supposed
nobody's
to have an
hurt.
appraisal this morning, and then we were supposed to have a home inspection on Saturday. Well, all that stuff is off right now. And the good news is everybody in the house was safe.
Yeah.
So that's where like there's nothing else that can compensate for something that happens to someone. And then here we just are very fortunate that everybody in this situation was safe. We're thankful for that. But we have a tree in the living room. It was not there before, right? So it happened last night. Tree fell down on the house. We're 3 or 4 weeks away from closing. But we don't have so right now my buyer doesn't have a house that they can still buy the house theoretically, but the bank's not going to fund it. The seller can't deliver the house in the condition that it needs to be.
Yeah.
And we got an insurance company that's got to step in here. Tell me, Bob, walk us through some of the processes that would happen now. This is like a scenario that we don't run into during the middle of a transaction very often, but it can happen. Obviously, it's happening. This happens to people, with their house. So let's talk a little bit about what are the steps that needs to happen here.
Well, I'm sorry to say, John, that it looks like there's a fly in the ointment here. But I
Yes,
mean,
you might say that.
you call your insurance carrier and you report the claim and get talking to an adjuster and explain the circumstance. But I mean, the first thing is, where are they going to live? Well, there's a loss of use benefit. And that means that
Right. So they're displaced,
it'll pay for them to live someplace else
right? Which
while
is
the
an
home is
inconvenience
being
to say the
repaired.
least.
But but it's not really an insurance issue. The money is going to be there to pay for the repair. It's a question of lining up the contractors and the the permits and the
Yep.
plans and all of the things that go into, I mean, I don't know how seriously damaged this house is,
We're
but
presuming at this point, so, you got from the scale of what could have happened, right? There's one scale where some shingles blew off a roof. All
yeah,
right. So if on
yeah,
one end of the spectrum, that's
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 not,
some
that's
damage.
something that can be fixed tomorrow.
On the other end of the spectrum is a total demolition of the house. So
Yeah.
we're somewhere in between those
But if you
areas.
had a house, if you had a tree actually come through the
It's in the
rafters and into the living room, that's very serious.
That's a pretty serious amount of damage. Yeah. So
And so you've got to get a general contractor and maybe an architect to look at it.
right. Because they don't even looking at it, you may not be able to assess what the damage is until they get
I mean, the
everything
first thing that's got to
out.
happen is you got to get somebody there to pull the tree out of there.
Tree's got to get out of there without damaging other parts of the property. They've got
So you're going to have,
belongings in the
you've got
house.
to, I mean, you've got to get a company with a crane or whatever that does that kind of work. Of course, after last night, they're very busy.
Right. Right. So timing is kind of off the table. We don't know what the timelines are going to be. So this is just an interesting scenario. This is going to be a one that I'll
Well,
be
I would like
interested.
to know how you work it out, but I'm glad it's not my claim.
Right, right. That's like an insurance adjuster's nightmare, right? Well, this is what insurance companies are supposed to do, and this is what you're supposed to be able to call your insurance company about.
Yeah,
It's an uncomfortable scenario for everybody, but we want to make, again, everybody is safe, and that's the most important thing. But the insurance company, I'm sure, wants to make sure that their client is taken care of, and that they can get on about their life, because this is an interruption that nobody had anticipated. They're moving. The seller, the people that own the home right now, are going to be moving to their new destination. They've got a house that they're trying to buy at the end of this month. So I don't know. It's
yeah.
be
So
interesting to see how the
it
relocation
messes
comes.
up everything because I don't think your closing is going to happen on schedule.
Well, our closing is not going to happen on closing. My
Yeah,
buyer is not going to be able to purchase that house on the 1st of February because it won't be
yeah,
repaired by then.
yeah.
Now, does it affect the seller's ability to purchase the next house subsequently using the relocation companies? So those are some rules that we just don't know yet. I don't want to speculate on too much on that. But anyway, there'll be follow-ups. So, bringing this point of conversation up because there'll be follow-ups in future conversations. These are situations that don't happen very often during the time of a contract when we're in escrow, but it can happen. And
Yeah.
what does it mean contractually? These are contractual rules that are we have an undeliverable product with a buyer that would be willing to buy it if it was deliverable, but we can't, seller can't deliver and the buyer can't perform. So
That's
uh,
more that's more of a real estate and legal question than an insurance question.
right, yeah, that part
Yeah,
gets into contractual stuff and legal things and all that kind of stuff. With that in mind, that's the real world stuff. And you have information here on how your insurance company rates your homeowner's insurance. So let's talk a little bit about that and even talk about this real world scenario.
well, I mean, so when somebody goes to buy a house and they're in this neighborhood wherever they are, and they talk to the neighbor or whatever while they're out, looking at the house, and the neighbor says, "Yeah, my homeowner's insurance is $900 a year." That sounds great, whatever. Then they go to their insurance agent, and insurance agent quotes it as $1,500 a year. Well, the house is almost identical. What's the matter? What's going on here? And so anyway, um, so what goes into rating a homeowner policy? There's basically five different components that go into the rate, basic components that go into the rate. And
okay,
um, so the first thing that we want to know about a house is where is it?
okay,
Because we want to know what kind of exposures the house has to hazards. And the main hazards that a home has are weather or wind, mostly wind, but some places weather like hail or hurricanes, storms like that. So weather generally, what is the exposure to weather? What is the exposure to fire? And
Mm,
around here, we don't think about fire as much as they do in other places like California. But out there, fire is very real. There's fire storms.
yeah.
So, fire is more of a danger than a windstorm, let's say. And then the other thing that could enter into it is what is the exposure to things like crime?
Right.
If the house is in a neighborhood with a high crime rate, then that can affect the rate for homeowners insurance. So that's what the location is about. Around here, if you have a house that's exposed to wind, it's usually a waterfront house. When you have waterfront, there's nothing to break the wind.
Yeah. It's directly coming
And
across that
so the
body of
wind
water.
can affect it more than an inland location. Last night, if you look around where the highest wind gusts were, they probably were recorded close to the water. And I was just down at Virginia Beach, and when we got out on the boardwalk, yes, the wind was definitely more than just being a block or two in.
Oh, it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, you can feel it's blowing you away when you're walking along the ocean front versus being a couple of blocks in, you don't even feel the wind. So anyway, that's the first thing. The second thing is something called protection class, and protection class has to do with what protection is provided by the fire department and
Uh,
by fire hydrants or water source to put the fire out. Homeowner insurance companies like to see fire hydrants close to the house within 1,000 feet. If they're more than 1,000 feet away or there are no fire hydrants around at all, then the rate is going to be higher. Because when the fire department comes, they've got to set up some other type of way to draw water to put out the fire.
right.
They set up these big pools, and they have tanker trucks that dump water into these pools, and then they draw from the pools to spray water onto the house to put out the fire. The other thing is the fire department. How far away is it? Standard distance is 5 miles or less. But then we want to know, is it a full-time fire department paid, or is it a part-time paid, or is it a strictly volunteer fire department? And that all has effect on the rate,
Yep.
what type of protection class there is. So if you're in downtown Williamsburg, you're in a very low protection class. Every place in downtown Williamsburg is within a stone's throw of the big Williamsburg Fire Department
Nice new
station.
building down there.
That's got every kind of fire apparatus imaginable.
Right.
And they've got these firefighters ready to go any time of the day or night. They sleep there. So that's why it's a low protection class versus out in New Kent or in a rural county area. They may not be there. They may be responding from their home to the fire department, and then they're
Yes.
going
Well,
a longer distance to get to the fire. And so sometimes they're lucky if they save the foundation by the time they get there.
I mean, when
Terrible.
someone's shopping for a home, a lot of times they're taking into consideration cost of living. All right. Cost of living is partly made up of what kind of services you have available to you, and that is affected in your taxes. And so if your taxes are incredibly low for the community that you live in, you may be sacrificing a little bit of some of those fundamental foundational services that are part of the infrastructure of
Yeah.
other communities. So I mean, you may have a volunteer, you may pay higher in taxes, but you probably are paying for better schools. You may be paying for better. Well, we won't get into that argument too much, but
Well, anyway,
but
the
but
other
yeah.
things that can be done to protect your house, like you can have an alarm system. I mean, one bad thing when there's a fire is that nobody notices it,
Oh, right, right.
and it just keeps going and going. And so you can have alarm systems which cause a discount on your homeowner rate, or just the fact that the house is occupied. to insure an unoccupied dwelling costs more because there's a fire, nobody smells any smoke, or nobody
Yeah,
hears the alarms go off. And so that's why it's more expensive to insure an unoccupied dwelling versus a dwelling that's being lived in and slept in.
sure.
Okay. So anyway, that goes into the rate. The next thing is the dwelling itself. What type of construction materials are used? I mean, we learned with was it Little Red Riding Hood that a brick home is better than a wood home that's better than a straw home?
You're right.
Is that the one? Anyway, well, it's true with homeowner rates too. The insurance company likes brick more than they like vinyl or wood siding because sparks that travel from a fire that hit brick, nothing happens. But when they hit wood, those embers will cause that home to go on fire. So it's more susceptible to fire because of the type of construction materials that it's made out of. So a brick house is less expensive to insure than a wood house, for example. Um, what type of material is on the roof? You nowadays metal roofs are becoming more popular. That's a good fire resistant roof in many cases. Or do you have asphalt shingle roof or some other material up there? And how old is the roof?
Mm,
An older roof is going to be more susceptible to fire than a newer roof. Um, so all of that goes into how the dwelling was built. And then the next thing that affects the rate is, well, what is the cost to replace the dwelling? Uh, a, a 3,000 foot dwelling is going to cost more than a 1,500 square foot dwelling
of course, right. So you just
to rebuild, to replace. So it's the reconstruction cost, the amount of the insurance is more. So the cost per square foot might be the same, but because it's twice as big, it costs twice as much to rebuild it,
yeah.
and it costs twice as much to insure it because of that. So those are all things that go into um, the cost of uh, rating and homeowner policy. But then there's the last one. So the neighbor was talking to the other neighbor, and he said, "Well, mine was 900 a year, and I just got a quote 1,500. What happened?" Well, the insured, the person who isn't named on the insurance policy, that affects it because that insured has a loss history or that insured has a credit history that may not be as good as the other person.
right. So it depends a lot on the individual. Right. Okay.
So this fellow that had the tree come through his house, I hate to tell you, that's going to affect him for years
Right.
because that is on his record personally, even though it was an act of nature. It wasn't anything that he did. It's still a claim that he is going to carry around, and that's going to affect his homeowner rate even when he gets to his new destination.
Right.
I hate to tell you, but that's the way it works.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't like hearing that. But
And
it's kind of the
and it's the same thing. If someone comes to me with a 800 credit score versus a 650, the 650 is going to pay more because it's it's a it's statistically it's a higher risk to insure the house with when the person has a lower credit score. They're not as responsible for for maintaining things, but taking care of things. That's statistically true.
we base our
May not
information
be true for that
on
person.
previous.
That 650 may be very responsible person, but insurance companies work on the law of large numbers. That's how they rate things, and
Yep.
that's how it can affect you. So the moral of the story is don't make a claim unless you absolutely have to. There's a tree in your living room, you have to.
Oh yeah, it's not something you can remedy
If
by
there's 10 shingles
cut it
missing,
out.
you don't have to. Don't do it.
So here's a question. Okay. So if you've got somebody that's insured with you through Port Insurance, um, I would always like to be able to talk to uh my representative. And
Yeah.
if you're able to advise somebody, if they call and say, "Hey Bob, some shingles blew off from my house," you're going to be able to talk to them through that scenario. What would you be able to tell them? Yeah, don't worry about making that claim. Just go get it fixed.
Yeah, well, the
Or
first thing when I talked to them originally, I would say, well, let's use a higher deductible so that you're not tempted to make a claim for something like that. It'll lower your premium that you pay every year, and it reduces the temptation to make a small claim that's going to affect your rate for a long time.
right. Should somebody
So I've
call
already
you?
I've already talked to them about that scenario when I wrote the policy.
Okay. All right. So if they're on the fence on that, should they just give you a call?
Yeah. Oh, anytime you have a question, give your insurance agent, or if I am the person, call me. Sure. Let
Okay.
me know. I mean, I cannot answer a question that I have not heard. I cannot solve a problem that I don't know about.
Right.
So yeah,
And
you gotta call.
it's not going to, you're not going to punish them for calling you.
It's better to call me because, like, especially with your car insurance, you're in a little fender bender. We've had this conversation before. I think the last time we met, we talked about this. Something small happens, it'll affect your car insurance rate for a long time. If you can handle it without making a claim, it could in the long run save you money.
Yeah. Good information, Bob. Once again, I appreciate your sharing your insight and your years of experience. We'll talk a little bit more about this, real world scenario that we're dealing with today. This is unfolding like in the moment. This all happened last night, and we're just learning more about this particular scenario with the tree in the living room today. Um, needless to say, it's going to affect my buyer's contract, and the seller is hopefully you're going to be able to have a place to stay here soon. So we'll see what happens with all that. In the meantime, we're going to let you get about your day, and we got work to do here. So look
Let
forward
me know
to.
how this works out. I'm curious to know how this story ends. I know it's going to take a while though.
Oh well, we'll talk about it more next week. We'll talk about it more over the next couple months, and
Okay.
fill in the gaps. This will be a fun conversation to have.
Okay.
Real world stuff, man. All right, have a great day, Bob.
Thanks a lot, John. Take care.
Bye.